Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS MLB Tuesday. We got 15 games on the board. I'll go through a bunch of them in this video, but on the live show, we'll go through every single game, make our final decisions. That's at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. I got Crispy Capping coming on to do WNBA first, and then Modai and Toast will join me. We'll go through every single MLB game. As far as Monday night, I had a green one. Went 3-2. I'll take it. I was away this weekend. Good friend of mine from high school is getting married, so I was down in Atlantic City. So I was away from the action. So it's nice to come back, jump back in, have a green day. I'll take it. So yeah, Tuesday night, 15 games on the board. Let's roll.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
All right, first on the board, we got Cleveland on the road in Baltimore. Here, the O's are home favorites, minus 140, and the total sitting at 9.5. We got Logan Allen throwing for the Guardians, Cole Irvin on the mound for Baltimore. So a lefty-lefty matchup here. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got to lean on Baltimore through the first 5, 3.71 to 3.1, so high-scoring first 5 innings here. Final score is pretty much dead even. Slight lean on the O's, 5.26 to 5.20. Before we get into this one, let's look at some ROI numbers. Both these teams have been profitable this year on the season, plus 19.1% for Cleveland, plus 10.1% for Baltimore. Recently, though, it has not been a profitable decision to back the O's on the last 10 games of minus 22.7. Baltimore's been profitable at home, though, on the season, plus 7.4%. In the last 10 games, plus 24.1%. Meanwhile, Cleveland has not been profitable recently on the road, minus 3.8% in the last 10 games, minus 16.4% in the last 5. So let's take a look at this matchup, and we'll start with the Cleveland bats. As we know, the Guardians have been hitting all year. On the last 30 days, 5th in WRC+, 6th in OPS, 6th in WOBA. Same goes for the last 14 days, the last 7 days. They've also been hitting on the road. This is a top 10 road lineup all year. In the last 30 days, 5th, 6th, and 6th. Here's where it gets a little tricky for Cleveland. They're up against a lefty again, and I was just talking about these numbers with Kate Povich on the mound last night, or tonight, I should say, when I'm recording this, earlier tonight. Cleveland's numbers against lefties not nearly as good as their numbers against righties. This is a top 10, even a top 5 lineup against righties this year. You can see against lefties, that's just not the case. This is a pretty average lineup against left-handed pitching. Now, this graphic doesn't include Kate Povich, the start that just happened, but the last 2 lefty starters to pitch against Cleveland, 2.45 ERA. So they've been having problems scoring on lefty starters, and you can see, Nick Lodolo, 6 innings, 2 earned runs. Trevor Rogers, 5 innings, 1 earned run. Before that, they were able to get to Mitchell Parker. Patrick Corbin, they got to a little bit. Ty Block, didn't really get to him. So as a whole, this Cleveland lineup is extremely dangerous, but not so much against lefties, which brings us to Cole Irvin, who, man, Cole's been going through it. You can see he still has great numbers on the season, 3.45 ERA, 1.25 whip, 4.22 expected FIP. Look at his last 4 starts, last 2 starts. 6.97 ERA in his last 2 starts is definitely pretty rough. Now, the good news is this game's at home in Baltimore, where he's definitely been better. You can see last 5 home starts, 2.55 ERA, 1.34 whip. So his recent struggles have definitely come more so on the road. And you can see his starts right here in Yankee Stadium. We'll give him a pass for that one. Everyone gets rocked in Yankee Stadium. For that, got hit up at home by the Braves. Braves seem to be coming back to life a little bit. Struggled against Tampa twice. Got to go back to late May to find when Cole Irvin was really dealing. Now, I want to bring up Cole Irvin's righty-lefty splits here. As you can see, he's got absolutely dominant numbers against lefties. Cleveland's going to have 3 lefties in the lineup. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but normally when there's a lefty starter on the mound, these teams are loaded up with 7, 8, 9 right-handed bats. Cleveland's a pretty lefty-heavy lineup. So even when they bring in their lineup that's based for left-handed pitching, there's still Naylor, Kwan, Jimenez. There's still some important bats that are true lefties. So I know Cole Irvin hasn't been reliable at all, but this might be a nice position for him to put together a good game. On the other side, we got the Baltimore bats, as we know, one of the best lineups in baseball. In fact, in the last 30 days, they are the best lineup in baseball. First, and first. They could definitely hit at home. This is a top 5, top 6 lineup at home this year. In the last 30 days, third, and fourth. Now we get to their numbers against left-handed pitching, and just like Cleveland, this is a lineup that's definitely been better against righties. In the last 30 days, this is actually a bottom 10 lineup against left-handed pitching, 24th, 23rd, and 23rd. The last 4 lefty starters to pitch against Baltimore, 2.28 ERA and a 1.10 whip, 3.03 expected FIP. So lefty starters have not had problems pitching against the Orioles. You can see here, Nestor Cortez, 6 shutout innings. Ranger Suarez, 6 2/3 innings, 1 earned run. They did get to Max Fried before that, But before that, Kikuchi, 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run. Garrett Crochet, 6 innings pitched, 2 earned runs. Now, to be fair to Baltimore, these are some pretty good names on this list, and Logan Allen just really doesn't fit the description. This is definitely a step down in competition. You can see Logan Allen really struggles against righty bats as well. Baltimore is going to have a lineup loaded full of righties. They're normally a lefty-heavy lineup, but they're loaded up with righties against lefties, so it should be a really tough spot for Logan Allen, who's been better, by the way, in his last 3 starts. 3.18 ERA, 124 WHIP, but again, 5.99 expected FIP indicates he's definitely had some good luck. His numbers on the road, decent, average. 4.81 ERA, 152 WHIP. 5.11 expected FIP in his last 5 road starts. Don't love that. And then you look at who he's pitched against. The Mariners, they don't hit lefties. Toronto's actually hit lefties a little bit this year. Miami, they're one of the worst lineups in baseball against lefties. The Rockies and Coors crushed him. The Angels, this isn't the toughest competition. Now he's on the road in Baltimore. This should be a struggle. But if you are looking to back Logan Allen, you can point at the fact that he has pitched really well against good lineups, against top 10 lineups versus lefties. 2.60 ERA, 133 WHIP. It's only 17 and a third innings pitch. Is a super small sample size, but that's something if you're looking to back Cole Allen. There is something there. As a whole, though, I don't trust him in this spot. I know Baltimore hasn't been getting to lefty starters. I don't care. I don't trust Logan Allen making a road start here at all. As far as the bullpen matchups, you got to give the edge to Cleveland. They've been the best bullpen in baseball, but Baltimore's right there. The last 30 days, Cleveland's first in ERA, first in WOBA, first in expected FIP. Baltimore's 5th, 3rd, and 17th, so it's not like the Orioles bullpen has been bad. They've been every bit as good. They're probably one small step down from Cleveland. As far as offenses against bullpens, it evens right out because Baltimore's offense has been better in the late innings than Cleveland's has. Not that Cleveland's has been bad, but see, we're talking about 10th to 15th range for the Guardians, top 5 range for Baltimore. As far as usage goes, Cleveland should have Clase and Cade Smith back. Both were unavailable in the game earlier tonight, which is one of the reasons I bet Baltimore, but it didn't matter. Scott Barlow and Hunter Gaddis took over, shut the O's down, and secured the win. So Cleveland's bullpen is definitely a bit taxed, but they're going to have some good arms available. As far as betting this game, I'm looking towards the under. You can get a 9.5 out there. It's a lefty-lefty matchup with 2 lineups that are much better against righties, that are definitely overvalued against lefties. 2 good bullpens. 9.5 just seems too high for me. I do have a bunch of bets open, and this isn't one of them. So as of right now, it's just under 9.5 or pass for me. Next up, we got the Phillies on the road in Detroit to play the Tigers. Good pitching matchup in this one. We got Ranger Suarez versus Tariq Skubal, another lefty-lefty matchup, a couple of aces. Tigers are short home dogs here, plus 108, total sitting at 7.5. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got a slight lean on the Phillies after 5 innings, 2.25 to 2.02. Final score, definitely a lean on the Phillies, 4.44 to 3.64. So before we take a look at this matchup, let's look at some ROI numbers. Obviously, the Phillies have been a more profitable team to bet this year than the Tigers, plus 8.9% on the season to minus 8.6%. Recently, the Phillies haven't been profitable, though. In the last 10 games, they're actually down money, minus 7.3%. But so is Detroit. The last 10 days, minus 20.6%. Phillies on the road actually have not been profitable. Minus 1.5% betting the Phillies on the road this year. So if you've been backing the Phillies on the road, you're down money on the season. But, if you've been backing the Tigers at home, you're down even more money. Minus 15% even for the Tigers. So let's go ahead and take a look at this matchup. We'll start with the Phillies bats, who are starting to come alive again. They were definitely cold there for a little bit. They were still winning games because they were pitching great. They were playing great defense. The bullpen was elite. But now they're starting to hit again. In the last 30 days, 11th in WRC+, 10th in OPS, 10th in WOBA. In the last 14 days, top 10 across the board. On the road, as we know, Phillies have been a great lineup on the road this whole season, 6, 6, and 6. Last 30 days, pretty average, 15th, 15th, and 15th. Against lefties, though, all green here for the Phillies. In the last 30 days, 4th, 5th, and 5th, so they've definitely been hitting lefties. The last 3 lefty starters to pitch against the Phillies, 8.03 ERA and a 186 WHIP. They've actually crushed the last few lefty starters they've seen, and here they are. They crushed Quintana, crushed Manaea. Didn't really get to Aaron Ashby much. 7 base runners in 5 innings, 2 earned runs. It's pretty average. Before that, crushed Kyle Harrison, crushed Blake Snell. So yeah, the Phillies have been annihilating lefty starters, and they're up against Tariq Skubal, who likes to throw the fastball a lot. 32.6% of his pitches are 4-seam fastballs. Phillies have been great hitting the fastball all season. He also throws the changeup a lot, and the Phillies have struggled against the changeup. So if you are looking to back Skubal, you can look at that. But as a whole, it's looking like a pretty good matchup for the Phillies. You can see Skubal's numbers on the season, obviously excellent. 250 ERA, 0.97 whip, 291 expected FIP. I mean, Cy Young type numbers. It's been excellent at home. His last 3 home starts, 135 ERA and an even 1 whip. When we pull up his game logs, yeah, a little vulnerable in his last 2 starts, but they were both on the road at Atlanta, at Houston. 2 tough places to go pitch. As a whole, Skubal's been a beast all season. You can see he's been a beast against good lineups. On the season, he's thrown 23 and 2/3 innings pitched against top 10 lineups versus lefties. He's got a 228 ERA and an 0.89 whip in those innings pitched. So he's been great against good lineups. I think he can pitch well. I know the Phillies have crushed lefty starters, but Skubal at home, it's a tough spot. So I wouldn't be surprised if Skubal puts out a great start, even against this Phillies lineup. On the other side, we got the Detroit lineup, though, and this is where, I mean, I don't know how we can find an angle for the Tigers to put up runs on Ranger Suarez, but, I mean, you can see here, Tigers, last 30 days, bottom 5 lineup against lefties. Yeah, pretty bad. I mean, bottom 10 lineup the last 30 days, last 14 days, bottom 10 or 11 lineup, I should say. At home, bottom 10 lineup this season, 22nd, 21st, and 21st. In the last 30 days, they're closer to average. So I guess that's something if you're looking to back the Tigers, but not much here. The last 3 lefty starters to pitch against the Tigers, they combined for a 1.17 ERA. So lefty starters have not been allowing runs to the Tigers. Also, they have terrible numbers against good lefty starters. And Ranger Suarez is elite. He's got a 1.75 ERA on the season. The Tigers against lefties with an ERA below 3.50, dead last in runs scored per 9 innings. So, yeah, this is tough. Now, you can point at the game logs and say, hey, Kyle, the Tigers have seen some tough lefties, I guess, but, I mean, Patrick Corbin's in there, Mitchell Parker, Kikuchi. They actually got to Kikuchi. But, yeah, you can point at Cole Reagans, Max Fried, I guess, but as a whole, I don't trust this Tigers lineup. I don't trust them against righties either, but certainly don't trust them against lefties. It also doesn't help Detroit's cause that Ranger Suarez's main pitch is the sinker. Want to know who the worst lineup in baseball is against sinkers in the last 30 days? Yes, you guessed it, the Detroit Tigers. And speaking of Ranger Suarez, we know he's been elite. On the season, 1.75 ERA, 0.89 whip. I mean, Cy Young numbers for Ranger Suarez. Same thing in his last 9 starts, his last 5 starts. He hasn't slowed down at all. He's been a beast on the road all season. And I mean, that's historically, he's been a beast on the road, even dating back multiple years. You can always trust this guy on the road. On the road this season, 1.94 ERA and an 0.84 whip. He's been truly elite on the road. Against good lineups, against bad lineups, it really doesn't matter. Ranger Suarez has shut everyone down. Against bottom 10 lineups against lefties, he's got a 1.59 ERA and an 0.78 whip through 51 innings pitched. So this is not a small sample size. He has shut down bad lineups. Here are his game logs. I mean, when's the last time he had a bad start? May 26th at Coors Field? If your only the only bad start on your recent game logs is a road start in Coors Field, I'd say you're looking pretty good. So as much as I think Tariq Skubal can pitch a good game against this Phillies lineup, I do not trust the Tigers bats to touch Ranger Suarez at all. And then we get to the bullpen matchup. Last 30 days, edge definitely goes to the Phillies. Although if you narrow it down to the last 14 days, it's definitely more even. In fact, Tigers bullpen seems to be coming back to life. If you remember early in the season, there was a stretch where the Tigers bullpen was doing pretty well. So maybe getting back to that, and the Phillies bullpen is slumping a bit. But still, overall, you have to give the edge to the Phillies bullpen here. And then offensively in the late innings, this has been the weak spot for the Phillies. They've been struggling to generate runs late in games. Still better than the Tigers, because the Tigers never score late in games. So edge definitely goes to the Phillies in the late innings. As far as betting this game, Phillies at -120 just seems like a sketchy price. I mean, I don't know how I could go any other way here. It would only be Phillies money line or maybe a Tigers team total under. But I'm probably just going to pass on this one. There's 15 games on the board. I have a bunch of bets open right now, so it'll be Phillies money line or pass, Tigers team total under or pass, something like that. Next up, Seattle is on the road at Tampa. Rays are short home dogs here, +112, and the total sitting down at 7.5. We got Castillo on the mound for Seattle and Zach Littell pitching for the Rays. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got a slight lean on Tampa through the first 5, 2.92 to 2.75, but a slight lean on the Mariners through the full game, 5.06 to 4.83. So before we get into this matchup, let's look at some ROI numbers. On the season, the Mariners have been profitable, +3.2% if you bet them every single game. In the last 10 games, the last 5 games, definitely heading the other way, though. In the last 5 games, on -61.2% ROI for Seattle, and the Rays have been paying out. If you've been betting Tampa the last 5 games, you're up +73.4%. But here's the thing. This game's at home in the Trop, and Tampa's been terrible at home all season, a minus 18.8% at home for Tampa. The good news would be Seattle on the road's been just as bad. Every bit as bad, actually, minus 18.1%. So Seattle on the road has definitely cost you a lot of money, but so has Tampa at home. So battle of two terrible spots here. Let's take a look at this matchup, and we'll look at the Seattle Bats. Pretty mediocre across the board. In the last 30 days, 15th, 22nd, and 21st. Same goes for the last 14 days, the last 7 days. Their numbers against right-handed pitching, same, pretty average, 14th, 18th, and 18th in the last 30 days. Same thing goes for the last 14 days. Their numbers on the road, same, pretty average here. I mean, on the season, 14th, 16th, and 15th. Last 30 days, 13th, 14th, and 14th. So just pretty average across the board. The last 6 righty starters to pitch against the Mariners, pretty average, 3.60 ERA and a 1.23 whip. So just nothing jumps out at all as far as the Mariners matchup against right-handed pitching or hitting on the road. Here are the game logs. They got blanked by Tanner Bybee, but then they rocked Tristan McKenzie. They got to Dane Dunning. They got to Eovaldi. So they didn't get to Tanner Bybee, but the 3 righty starters before that, they did. But then you go back a start before that, Jonathan Cannon, shut him down. Eric Fetty, shut him down. So, I mean, how do you get a feel for this team? They've crushed a couple of these righties, and they've also got shut down by a couple of these righties. So, tough to get a feel for this Mariners lineup. As far as the pitch mix goes, Zach Littell's main pitch is the slider. He throws it over 40% of the time. The Mariners have been one of the worst lineups in baseball trying to hit the slider. His secondary pitch is the splitter. They've also been pretty bad against that. So that's a nice look for Zach Littell if you're trying to bet the Rays here. Now, the bad news for Zach Littell is he hasn't been pitching well at all. In his last 4 starts, he's got a 6.63 ERA and a 1.89 whip. So Littell's really been struggling, but his struggles have come mostly on the road. You can see his last 5 home starts, 3.26 ERA, 1.02 whip. So he's got solid numbers at home. It's on the road where he's been having a hard time. You can see his game logs. Look at his last 2 starts on the road, at Minnesota, at Atlanta. He actually was okay at Minnesota, but got crushed by the Braves. Before that, home start against the Orioles. That's as tough as it gets. He was okay. 8 base runners, 3 earned runs, and 6 innings pitched. Against Baltimore, you'll take that. His 2 home starts before that, he pitched well against Oakland, pitched well against Boston. So at home, Littell really hasn't been that bad. Although as a whole, he's struggling lately. At home, he really hasn't been that bad. So I know putting faith in Zach Littell is definitely challenging right now, but I don't have a ton of faith in Seattle Bats. So I don't think it's crazy to think Zach Littell could pitch well here. On the other side, we got the Tampa Bats, and the Rays have actually been hitting. In the last 30 days, 13th in WRC+, 17th in OPS, 16th in WOBA. Against right-handed pitching, I mean, the last 14 days, 11th, 14th, and 13th. By Tampa Bay Rays standards this year, those are elite. I mean, they've been towards the bottom of baseball most of this season. But now we look at their numbers at home, and this is where it all comes crashing down. This team has not hit at home in the Trop all season. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 2, bottom 3 lineup at home. They just never seem to score runs at home. And you can see here, they're not getting to righty starters. The last 8 righty starters to pitch against the Rays, 2.70 ERA, a 1.09 whip. And here they are. They didn't touch Skeens. They didn't touch Jared Jones. They didn't touch Simeon Woods Richardson. Didn't touch Joe Ryan. Got to go back to Pablo Lopez on the 18th. To find the last time they got to a righty starter, and everyone's getting to Pablo Lopez right now, so I'm not even sure if that's an accomplishment. And then right before that, they got shut down by Charlie Morton. So yeah, I don't have a ton of faith in this Rays lineup against right-handed pitching right now. Also, they're up against Castillo, who throws a ton of fastballs. 45% of Castillo's pitches are 4-seam fastballs, and the Rays haven't been hitting fastballs all season. In the last 30 days, they're 23rd against the 4-seam fastball. They have been hitting sliders, and Castillo does use the slider, so there's something if you're looking to back Tampa, but as a whole, it doesn't look like the greatest matchup. Then we look at Castillo's numbers, and actually, he's been giving up some runs. In his last 3 starts, 6.75 ERA, 1.38 whip. In his last 2 road starts, he's got an even 9 ERA. 6 ERA in his last 4 starts on the road. But then we look at his game logs, and you look at those road starts at Cleveland, at Kansas City, and this was at Kansas City over 2 weeks ago, back when they were a dangerous lineup at home. Before that, at Yankee Stadium, at Baltimore. Is there a tougher 4 road game stretch than that? At Cleveland, at Kansas City 2.5 weeks ago, at Yankee Stadium, at Baltimore. I mean, maybe we can cut them a little bit of slack with these road numbers, because that is the gauntlet right there. That being said, just when I'm starting to like the spot for Luis Castillo, I look at his righty-lefty splits, and it's a little concerning because the Rays should have some lefties in the lineup. Now, Brandon Lowe didn't play tonight, so we'll have to see if he's back in the lineup. That'd be a key lefty to get in there. You can see Castillo, 358 WOBA versus lefties, 265 against righties. So he struggles with lefty bats. we need to know if Brandon Lowe is going to be in the lineup, because that's probably the most important lefty they got. If he's in the lineup, they should have 5 lefties in there, which could be a problem for Castillo. So as a whole, you would think Castillo against Zach Littell, got to give the edge to the Mariners in the first 5. But if Brandon Lowe's in the lineup, I might like the edge for Tampa in the first 5, honestly. I think they could get to Castillo. As far as the bullpen matchup goes, got to give the edge to Seattle. Although, if you look at the last 14 days, it looks pretty even. Tampa's bullpen starting to come to life a little bit. The last 14 days, 10th in ERA, 5th in WOBA, 15th in expected FIP. And offensively against bullpens, the edge might go to Tampa. It's pretty close. On the last 14 days, Tampa's a top 10 lineup against opposing bullpens. So actually, in late innings, this might be pretty even, maybe even a slight lean towards the Rays. And then you take into account that the Mariners just used every single arm in their bullpen earlier tonight. I mean, I'm considering a Tampa bet here. Munoz and Stanek will be available for the Mariners, but the Rays have just seen both of them, as well as every single arm in that pen. There is no Fairbanks for the Rays, and that's definitely a little bit concerning. Makes backing the Rays tough here, but I'm leaning towards Tampa. It's going to be Rays money line or pass for me. Next up, we got the Subway Series. Yankees on the road in Citi Field here. Mets are dogs at home, plus 125, total sitting at 8. We got Garrett Cole pitching for the Yankees against David Peterson for the Mets. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got to lean on the Yanks through the first 5, 3.13 to 2.66. Final score, though, leans towards the Mets, 5.19 to 4.70. Before we get into this matchup, let's look at some ROI numbers. The Yankees have been more profitable than the Mets, plus 10.6% on the season to a minus 2%. But recently, it's been all Mets, and it's not close. In the last 10 games, the Mets have a plus 51.8% ROR to a minus 7.2% for the Yankees. The thing is, the Mets on the season have been much more profitable on the road. You can see on the season at home, minus 19.2%. Now, in the last 10 games, the last 5 games, the numbers look great. But as a whole, the Mets have been a fade at home this season. Meanwhile, the Yankees are plus 18.2% ROI on the road. But again, look at the last 5 games, minus 34.6%. So Yanks haven't been very profitable on the road as of late. But let's take a look at the matchup, and we'll start with the Yankees bats. Definitely seem to be cooling off. On the last 30 days, 6th, 7th, and 7th. But in the last 14 days, looking pretty average. In the last 7 days, even slightly below average. As we know, the Yankees have been hitting on the road all season, 4th across the board. Last 30 days, last 14 days, both slightly in the top 10. The Yankees are a lineup that hits on the road. Now we get to their numbers against left-handed pitching, and they're not looking very Yankee-like here. Pretty average across the board. Last 30 days, last 14 days, last 7 days, looking pretty average. Here are the game logs here. They did get to Cole Irvin. Didn't really get to Cade Povich. They got to Blake Snell before that. Didn't get to Patrick Sandoval. They only got 1 run on Tyler Anderson, but they had 10 base runners, so that's a good game. They got to Tyler Anderson, even though they only got 1 run across. They got to Tyler Alexander, even though he did go 7 innings into the game. Didn't get to Skubal before that. So, I mean, not that these game logs look bad for the Yankees lineup, but definitely not explosive as they were looking a couple weeks ago, and definitely not as explosive as they look against right-handed starters, that's for sure. As far as the pitch mix for David Peterson, his main 2 pitches, sinker and 4-seam fastball, that's terrible news, because that's the 2 pitches that the Yankees hit best, 1st and 7th in the last 30 days. Speaking of David Peterson, let's take a look at his numbers. On the season, looking pretty average, 3.97 ERA, 1.41 WHIP. If you look at his numbers in his last 3 starts, last 2 starts, they all look pretty much the same, pretty average across the board. He's only made 4 starts on the season, by the way, so this is a very small sample size. Here are his starts laid out. You can see he's actually been much better in his 2 road starts. Now, maybe that was because they were against Texas and Washington, but his 1 home start was against the Marlins, and they hit him up bad. That was actually his last home start on June 12th. The other one's the Dodgers. Take it or leave it. They'll hit up anybody, but his last home start, he got hit around by the Marlins. Definitely not a good sign. Also, David Peterson is a guy who struggles against righty bats. 351 WOBA against righties compared to a 289 against lefties. The reason that's significant, Yankees have a very righty-heavy lineup. You see, they got Soto and Verdugo in there. Those are the lefties, but other than that, it's pretty much all righties for the Yankees. Maybe Grisham at the back of the order is a lefty, but very righty-heavy lineup from the Yankees here, which is not a good look for David Peterson. So even though the Yankees are cooling, and even though they don't hit left-handed pitching as much as they hit right-handed pitching, they should definitely be able to score some runs on David Peterson in this one. Now, on the other side, we got the Mets bats, and as we know, the Grimace Mets, Grimace Mets are for real. in the last 30 days, third, fourth, and third. In fact, last 30 days, last 14 days, last 7 days, this is a top 5 lineup across the board. Numbers against right-handed pitching look excellent. The last 30 days, they're top 10. Last 14 days, last 7 days, looking more like top 5. The last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Grimace Mets, 13.50 ERA and a 2.05 whip. So they've tattooed the last few righty starters they've seen. Michael Lorenzen, actually, only 5 base runners in 6 innings. But before that, they completely crushed John Gray, completely crushed Dylan Cease. Those 2 starts may be skewing the numbers a little bit, but as a whole, we know this Mets lineup is definitely hitting right now. And as good as Garrett Cole is, he's probably still going to be on a pitch limit here. Just 4 innings pitched in his first start back, 2 earned runs, 3 hits, 1 walk. Not bad at all, but he did not pitch deep into the game. I would imagine he's still going to be on a pitch limit. Last year when you saw the Mets, he pitched great, and this was at Citi Field. 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, just 1 earned run. But this is not last year's Garrett Cole, at least not yet. So that means the Yankees bullpen is definitely going to have a lot of pressure in this one. And as far as the bullpens go, the edge definitely goes to the Mets. Yankees bullpen has really been struggling. The last 30 days, this is a bottom 5, bottom 6 bullpen. In the last 14 days, it's a bottom 2, bottom 3 bullpen. So definitely huge edge for the Mets in the late innings, even without Edwin Diaz, who's been suspended for 10 days, I'm sure you've heard. And offensively in the late innings, the edge goes to the Mets recently. In the last 30 days, the Mets are a top 5 lineup in baseball in the late innings. Meanwhile, the Yankees are top 10. So, I mean, they're up there, not quite as effective as the Mets. And look at the last 7 days. First across the board to 15th, 16th, 16th. So the Mets definitely have the edge in the late innings in this one. So as far as betting this game, I was strongly considering a first 5 over 4.5. You can get it at plus 100. You could still get that. But I actually ended up slamming Mets team total over 3.5. This is just too low. Got it at minus 110 on ESPN Bet. I also really want to take the Mets money line. It's Yankees Mets. I'm a Mets fan. I'd love to have some money down on Mets money line, but there's definitely a chance that the Yankees just absolutely smoke David Peterson. So to protect myself from that, just rocking with the Mets team total over. I mean, how deep into this game is Garrett Cole even going to pitch? Give me the Mets team total over. Next up, we got Toronto on the road in Boston. Red Sox a very short home favorite here, minus 115, minus 118, somewhere in there. Total sitting up at 9.5. We got Kevin Gausman pitching for Toronto and Brian Bayo on the mound for the Bo Sox. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got a slight lean on Toronto through the first 5, 2.76 to 2.40, but a slight lean on Boston in the full game, 4.68 to 4.48. Before we get into this matchup, let's take a look at some ROI numbers, and they're very one-sided here as of late. On the season, Boston has definitely been more profitable than Toronto, plus 4.5% to minus 14%. But last 10 games, last 5 games, it's not even close. Toronto, as we know, has lost 5 in a row, so that comes with a minus 100% ROI. And the numbers at home for Boston look great recently. On the season, they've been terrible. They started off the season as one of the worst home teams in baseball, but in the last 10 home games, they got a plus 20.1% ROI, plus 74.5% in their last 5. Meanwhile, Toronto on the road has just been a blind fade. So let's take a look at this matchup, and we'll start with the Blue Jays bats. As we know, Toronto has not been a very dangerous offensive team this year. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 10 lineup, 22nd, 23rd, and 23rd. Same goes for the last 14 days. Against right-handed pitching, average to slightly below average in the last 30 days, 15th, 17th, 16th. In the last 14 days, last 7 days, those numbers look pretty much the same as the last 30 days. On the road, again, average to slightly below average. I mean, you can look at the last 30 days, 10th, 11th, and 10th, but look at the full season in the last 14 days. Toronto can't trust this lineup anywhere. The last 11 righty starters to pitch against Toronto, pretty average, 3.75 ERA, 1.16 whip, so really nothing to go by there. How about their numbers against Bayo's pitch mix? Again, pretty average. He throws the sinker, the changeup, and the slider. Toronto against those 3 pitches in the last 30 days, 18th, 13th, and 12th. So again, just nothing but mediocrity across the board when it comes to Toronto. Here are the game logs, and just like you'd expect, pretty average. They got to a couple. They got to Tristan McKenzie, didn't get to Ben Lively, didn't get to Carlos Carrasco, which is inexcusable. Didn't get to Bayo, which is probably the one we should be looking at, the guy they're about to see. Brian Bayo just pitched against Toronto June 19th. Went 6 innings, 2 earned runs. They did have 9 base runners, so that's a 150 whip. They were getting guys on base, but couldn't really get any runs across. Speaking of Brian Bayo, let's take a look at his numbers. This is not his year, and he came into this season with some serious expectations he was dealing for most of last season. In his last 8 starts, he's got a 5.95 ERA, 163 whip. In his last 4 starts, it's even worse than that. As far as his numbers at home, 5.63 ERA in his last 3 home starts, 6.55 in his last 2, Dude's really been struggling. Here are his game logs here, and as we just mentioned, his last start at Toronto, 9 base runners, 2 earned runs. I mean, I guess that's a decent start, but a 150 whip, you're not going to be able to put together good starts letting guys on base at that rate. Look at all his starts before that. He struggled against the Yankees, the White Sox, the Tigers, you name it, Bayo struggled against them. But I do have some good news if you plan on backing Boston here. Bayo's got great numbers against righty bats. He's got a 294 WOBA and a 119 whip. Compared to his numbers against lefties, those are excellent. Toronto, extremely righty heavy. They've got Horwitz leading off and Varsho batting fourth. Other than that, we're talking about 7 righties in this lineup. So at home against Toronto, a righty heavy lineup, this should be a spot that Bayo can pitch well, if he's capable of it. Maybe he just doesn't have the stuff this year, but if there is ever a spot for Bayo to step up and pitch well, it might be this one. So I don't think it's crazy to think that Bayo's able to pitch a decent game here. On the other side, we got Boston's bats, and as we know, the Red Sox have been hitting. Last 30 days, 7th, 5th, and 5th. Last 14 days, top 5 lineup. The numbers at home in Fenway look pretty good. On the last 30 days, 12th, 8th, and 7th, which is a huge improvement. I mean, you rewind back to April, May, like we were talking about, Boston was terrible. They weren't scoring any runs at home. That is long in the past. They've been hitting at home recently. Against right-handed pitching in the last 30 days, it looks great. 8th, 5th, and 5th. Last 7 days, not so much. I mean, that's a super small sample size, but maybe some signs that Boston's lineup is cooling off. Here are the game logs here. They didn't get to Frankie Montas, just 6 base runners and 2 earned runs in 6 innings. That was on the road in Cincinnati, too. Before that, Gausman, this is the same pitching matchup we just saw. Boston won that game 7-3. Boston got to Gausman. So Bayo definitely outpitched Gausman in that game. That was on the road in Toronto, though. This one's in Fenway, which should favor the Red Sox, right? Well, I'm not sure about that because Gausman on the road's been a beast. Now, you can see his last 2 starts, 5.73 ERA, 155 whip, not really having as a great season by his standards. But look at his numbers on the road. And he's made 7 road starts this season. He's got a 186 ERA and an 0.96 whip. He's been absolutely dominant on the road. He's been dominant against bottom 10 lineups. And this is where, I don't want to say the controversy, but this is where the debate comes for Kevin Gausman. Is he dominant on the road? Or does he have dominant numbers on the road because all his road starts are against easy lineups? And when we pull up his game logs, you can see it here. His home starts, Boston, Cleveland, Baltimore, Tampa. But those 3 right there. And that's kind of true throughout the whole season. At home, he pitches against a tough lineup. On the road, Oakland, the White Sox, the Tigers, and this just shows the last 7, but it goes back deeper than that. On the road, he's had a really easy schedule. Boston doesn't fit that description. Now, Boston does have pretty shitty numbers against his pitch mix, specifically the 4-seam fastball and the splitter. Those 2 pitches account for 84% of Kevin Gausman's pitch mix. Boston 19th and 24th in the last 30 days against those 2 pitches. So on the road, where he's been much better with a favorable pitch mix. So maybe not the worst spot for Kevin Gausman until you look at his righty-lefty splits, and this is where it gets a little scary here. Kevin Gausman's been struggling against lefty bats all season. 367 WOBA and a 149 whip against lefties compared to 287 and 110 against righties. Look how many lefties are projected to be in the lineup for Boston. 7. So he's got to pitch against 7 lefties here. I don't like that at all. So as good as Kevin Gausman's been on the road, and those numbers are elite, I think Boston's going to get to him. This lineup continues to hit. I think they hit Kevin Gausman on the road with all these lefties. When we take a look at the bullpen matchup, no question Boston has the edge. On the season, Boston's a top 5, top 6 bullpen. Toronto's a bottom 5, bottom 6 bullpen. If you look at the last 14 days, they are evening out a bit. Toronto's bullpen's definitely been doing a better job. But offensively, against opposing bullpens, it's not even a discussion. In the last 40 days, Toronto's the worst lineup in baseball in the late innings. Meanwhile, Boston's 6 across the board. Last 30 days, Boston's a top 5 lineup in the late innings. Toronto bottom 3. So in the late innings, even though Toronto's bullpen has been a little better as of late, offensively, the huge edge goes to Boston. As far as bullpen usage in this game, there's no Jansen for Boston. He pitched 3 consecutive nights, so no way Jansen's going to be available. Other than that, though, Boston got to rest all their main arms. They came from behind to win the game earlier tonight, so Jansen 3 straight. Other than that, Bo Sox should have all of their bullpen arms available, which is why it would only be Boston or pass for me. All those lefties in the Red Sox lineup should really be a problem for Gausman. Oh, man, I can't do this. Gausman on the road where he's been great at plus 100, minus 102. it's tough to pass up. It'll be Boston or pass for me. This is going to be a pass, though. Next up, we got Pittsburgh on the road in Great American Ballpark. Reds are short home favorites here, minus 120, and the total sitting at 8.5. We got Mitch Keller on the mound for the Pirates. Hunter Green pitching for the Reds. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got a slight lean on Pittsburgh. Well, it's pretty much dead even through the first 5 innings, 2.48 to 2.46. Final score slight lean towards the Reds, 3.92 to 4.32. Before we get into this matchup, let's look at some ROI numbers. Pretty even across the board here on the season, minus 8.4% to minus 7.2%. So neither of these teams have been profitable this year, and neither have been profitable recently either. Last 10 games, last 5 games, both just a bunch of negative ROIs across the board. Now, when we look at home away, same thing. On the season, Pirates on the road have not been profitable, and the Reds at home not been profitable. So just a bunch of negative ROIs across the board here. Let's take a look at the matchup. We got the Pirates lineup, which, as we know, is one of the worst units in baseball. In the last 30 days, 29th in WRC+, 29th in OPS, 29th in WOBA. Against right-handed pitching, not much better than that. In the last 30 days, bottom 5, bottom 6 lineup. On the road, I mean, if you look at the last 14 days, maybe the Pirates offense showing signs of life, but as a whole, this is pretty bad looking. The last 11 righty starters that pitch against the Pirates, 3.73 ERA, 105 whip, 3.23 expected FIP. So righty starters have had no problems with this lineup. And here are the game logs. Aaron Savale blanked him. They were able to score 4 runs on Zach Eflin, but they only had 6 base runners in 7 innings pitched. That's a solid start. They got a couple runs across, but no, by no means were they rocking Zach Eflin. They got to Pepe Le Pew, but before that, Hunter Green, 6 1/3 shutout. They got to Carson Spears a little bit, but as a whole, the Pirates are not a lineup I trust at all. And they have pretty terrible numbers against Hunter Green's pitch mix. In the last 30 days, against the 4-seam fastball and the slider, which account for pretty much all of Hunter Green's pitches, 27th and 22nd against those two pitches. And Hunter Green is a guy who has dominated bad lineups on the season against bottom 10 lineups versus righties. 13 1/3 innings pitched, so not a crazy big sample size here, but he hasn't let up a single earned run, a 0 ERA, and an 0.30 whip. So he's been completely dominant when he's seen bad lineups, and the Pirates are most definitely a bad lineup. Hunter Green's numbers on the season, 3.35 ERA, 1.12 whip. Pretty solid looking. Last 7 starts, last 4 starts, not quite as good as his full season numbers, but Hunter Green's having a good season. He's got solid numbers at home recently. Last 4 home starts, 3.09 ERA, 1.33 whip. Last 2 home starts look pretty much the same as that. And what I like about Hunter Green is he's got great numbers against lefty bats. Pirates are going to have 5 lefties in the lineup, including Brian Reynolds and O'Neal Cruz. You could argue the 2 most important pieces, both lefties. So overall, this is a solid matchup for Hunter Green. I don't love the fact that Pittsburgh just saw him, though, on June 19th, his last start, and he just blanked them. 6 1/3 shutout innings, just 2 hits. I don't love that. Normally, you would think they just saw him. They should be able to get to him in this next start. Doesn't always work out like that, but it's definitely not what I love to see. Overall, on this side, all signs point to Hunter Green throwing another gem against these Pirates, so that's what I'd lean towards. On the other side, we got the Reds bats, and Cincinnati, man. I mean, the last 30 days, 14th, 12th, and 11th, you rewind back a few weeks, they were hitting. Last 14 days, though, last 7 days, down to a bottom 5, bottom 6 lineup. Same thing versus right-handed pitching. Last 14 days, last 7 days, bottom 5, bottom 6 lineup. And at home, this has just been a disaster. The Reds just not scoring runs at home. Now, I know they did tonight, but we're talking about numbers on the season. 28th, 24th, and 23rd. Last 30 days, last 14 days. I mean, this lineup, and it's so different than what we're used to from the Reds. They always put up runs in Great American. Hasn't been the case this year. Here are their game logs against righty starters. You can see they got to Pavetta, got to Cutter Crawford a little bit, 3 earned runs, but just 7 base runners in 6 1/3 innings, so that's not a great start. Didn't get to Mitch Keller, didn't get to Paul Skeens, and Mitch Keller is probably the one we need to look at. That's who they're pitching against. So what we just said about Hunter Green, same thing applies here for Mitch Keller. 7 shutout innings, just 2 hits against the Reds. And speaking of Mitch Keller, let's pull up his numbers. He's having a great season. 3.11 ERA, 120 whip on the year. Last 5 starts, numbers look even better than that. 171, 104 whip. On the road, not quite as good, and that's kind of what we're going to look at here. Mitch Keller having a great season, been much better at home in Pittsburgh, and historically he's been much better at home in Pittsburgh against the Reds. He's really struggled in Great American Ballpark. As we see his game logs, most recent one, 7 shutout innings against the Reds, so they just saw him. And the Reds actually have some solid offensive numbers against his pitch mix. His 3 main pitches, which account for most of his pitches, 77%. These 3 pitches account for 4-seam fastball, slider, sinker. The Reds in the last 30 days against those pitches, 4th, 14th, and 14th. So as a whole, I know Mitch Keller's been great. I know he just blanked this lineup, and I know the Reds' bats have been terrible at home, but he always struggles in this ballpark, and I think the Reds are going to poke him up. As far as the bullpen matchup, the Reds have such a huge advantage, and it's actually not even close. This is a top 10 bullpen against a bottom 5 bullpen. Offensively, neither of these teams are really scoring runs in the late innings, so kind of a wash there, but no question, Cincinnati has the edge late in this game, which is why I'm taking them. I took the Reds money line. This is definitely one of my smaller bets, but got a minus 120 with a much better team. I like them to get to Mitch Keller, and they've got the huge edge late in the game. So even if the Pirates are able to get to Hunter Green, still think I'm live in this one. So I'm on the Reds money line. Next up, we got the Braves on the road in St. Louis to play the Cardinals. Cards are short home dogs here, plus 116. Total sitting at 8.5. We got Reynaldo Lopez on the mound for the Braves. Kyle Gibson pitching for the Cards. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet. 1 second, I didn't have it open. Braves, Cardinals. So let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet. According to the model, we are pretty much deadlocked after 5 innings. 2.5 to 2.42, so a slight lean on St. Louis. Slight lean on St. Louis through the full game also. 4.56 to 4.33 Cards. So before we get into this matchup, let's look at some ROI numbers. Braves, last 10 games, plus 41.7%, plus 49.2% in the last 5. Cardinals have been profitable too, though. In the last 10 games, plus 26.9% themselves. So both of these teams have been making you some money if you've been betting them recently. Last 10 games at home for the Cards, plus 11.3%. So the Cards have been paying out, backing them at home recently. Meanwhile, the Braves on the road, last 10 games minus 33.6%, last 5 games plus 19.2%. So good luck trying to get a feel for this team. But let's go ahead and take a look at the matchup. We got Kyle Gibson getting the start. Great season for Gibson. 3.44 ERA, 120 whip. Last 11 starts, last 4 starts, numbers look solid, even better. Seems to be getting better as the season goes along. Here are his game logs. I mean, went into Wrigley Field and blanked the Cubs. 7 shutout innings, just 2 hits. Before that, the Rockies were able to get to him, and actually the Astros got to him before that. I'm on the road in Houston, but other than that, I mean, you see a lot of really nice-looking starts from Kyle Gibson. Red Sox got to him, but they were red hot at the time. What I don't like here for Kyle Gibson is this game's at home in St. Louis. That's kind of been his Achilles heel this year. He's been so good on the road, but look at his numbers at home. He's got a 4.28 ERA at home this year. WOBA significantly higher. Strikeout to walk ratio way down at home. WHIP significantly higher at home. So he's just had a little bit of trouble at home in St. Louis. And he's going to be pitching to this Braves lineup. Now, who knows what to think about this Braves lineup right now? In the last 30 days, they've got pretty average, maybe even slightly below average numbers. 19th in WRC+, 15th in OPS, 18th in WOBA. In the last 14 days, slightly better than that. I mean, every single time we think the Braves lineup is back, they seem to take a step backwards. So really hard to get a feel for them right now. As I was saying earlier, Braves on the road in the last 30 days. This is a bottom 6, bottom 7 lineup in baseball on the road in the last 30 days. So is this lineup coming back or not? Look at their numbers against right-handed pitching. In the last 30 days, the Braves are a bottom 10 lineup against righties. And you look even more recent than that, last 14, last 7, even worse. So I don't know if we could trust this Braves lineup against right-handed pitching. Look at this. The last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Braves, 2.70 ERA and an 0.84 whip. So righty starters have had no problems pitching against Atlanta. And here are the game logs. I mean, Marcus Stroman, great game against the Braves. He gave up 3 earned runs, but just 5 base runners in 6 2/3 innings. That's a great start. Before that, Casey Mize struggled a bit, but he's been struggling with everybody. In fact, 4 innings pitched, 2 earned runs. That's not even a bad start for Casey Mize this year. Reese Olson, 6 shutout innings. Before that, they got to Zach Eflin a little bit, not really. I don't know. I don't know if I really trust this Braves lineup right now. Kyle Gibson has gotten tagged a little bit at home, but he really is having such a great season, and the Braves aren't hitting righties. So I want to say I trust Kyle Gibson to throw a good game, but I don't know if the numbers really support that. So really tough to handicap that side, Kyle Gibson pitching against the Braves. On the other side, we got another starter who's having a great season. Reynaldo Lopez, man. 1.57 ERA, 1.08 whip on the year. His last 4 starts, even better than that. 1.17 ERA, 1.04 whip. He's truly been excellent. Look at his numbers on the road. He's made 6 road starts on the season, so not a huge sample size. He's got a 2.14 ERA and a 1.04 whip. He's been absolutely dominant. Here are his game logs. 5 shutout innings against Detroit. On the road in Baltimore. That might be as tough as it gets for a righty starter this year. 6 shutout innings, just 2 hits. Before that, went into Washington, no problem. Oakland, 6 innings, 1 earned run. Got to go back to the Pittsburgh game on May 25th to find the last time he was really struggling. That really isn't even that bad. 4 2/3 innings, 2 earned runs. Blank the Padres, blank the Cubs. This guy's been awesome. But he's going to be pitching against a Cardinals lineup that seems to be coming to life here. In the last 30 days, slightly above average, pretty much average the last 14 days. Last 7 days, creeping up into the top 10. Look at their numbers at home. Last 30 days, top 10 lineup at home. And look at their numbers against right-handed pitching. In the last 30 days, 5th in WRC+, 6th in OPS, 7th in WOBA. Last 14 days, last 7 days, this is looking like a top 5 lineup against righties. The last 6 righty starters, so 6, solid sample size here. The last 6 righty starters to pitch against the Cardinals, 8.16 ERA and a 1.85 whip. The last 3, even worse than that. So the Cardinals have been tagging righty starters, and look who they are. Logan Webb, Jordan Hicks. Other than that, Keaton Wynn, Munoz, Tyone, but Mitch Keller. So, yeah, there's a couple bad names on here, but there's some good righty starters on this list. Cardinals are poking them. So the Cardinals lineup is turning into a lineup we can trust right now, especially against right-handed pitching. And to take it a step further, they've been good against good right-handed starters. Reynaldo Lopez, as we mentioned, has a 1.57 ERA on the season. Cardinals are a top 10 lineup against righties with an ERA below 3.50. Now, one thing I like for Lopez is he throws the fastball a lot. 57% of his pitches are four-seam fastballs. Cardinals have not been a great lineup against the fastball this year. 28th on the season, 17th in the last 30 days. But his other 2 pitches are a slider and a curveball, and the Cardinals are a top 10 lineup against those 2. So not the greatest look as far as pitch mix for the Cardinals lineup. But as a whole, I think all signs point to the Cardinals being a real tough spot for Lopez. And they're probably going to have 5 lefties in the lineup. Now, most of them are towards the bottom of the order, but still, 5 lefties in the lineup. Reynaldo Lopez definitely has significantly better numbers against righties. So I think the Cardinals are going to get to him. Seriously, I know Reynaldo Lopez has been great this year, but I think we can count on the Cardinals to get at least 2 or 3 runs across. Now, when we get to the bullpens, you got to give the edge to Atlanta, but it's not a landslide. The Cardinals bullpen has been pretty solid, just not as good as the Braves have. And offensively in the late innings, neither of these teams have been good. In the last 14 days, the Braves are 25th, 25th, and 27th. Cardinals are 23rd, 24th, and 24th. So neither of these lineups have been productive in the late innings. Slight edge to the Braves. As far as betting this game, I was strongly considering a Cardinals moneyline bet here, but I don't love the fact that Helsley isn't available for the Cardinals bullpen. He just pitched back-to-back nights, and he just threw 26 pitches. So I very seriously doubt he's available. And do I really trust Kyle Gibson at home against these Braves bats? The answer is no. So I'll say Cardinals moneyline at the plus 116 or pass, but it's probably going to end up being a pass for me. I really want to take the Cards, but too much other value on the board. Going to pass on this one. Next up, we got the Rangers on the road in Milwaukee. Brewers are short home favorites here, minus 125. Total sitting at 8.5. Andrew Heaney is pitching for the Rangers. Bryce Wilson on the mound for the Brewers. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, sorry, I should have this pulled up. According to the model, we got a slight lean on the Rangers through the first 5, 2.88 to 2.45. Final score, though, is pretty dead even. Slight lean on Milwaukee, 4.44 to 4.53. So before we get into this matchup, let's look at some ROI numbers. No question, Milwaukee's been a much more profitable team to bet than the Rangers have on the season. We're talking about a 9% plus in the positive ROI for Milwaukee, a minus 10% for the Rangers. And at home in Milwaukee, it's been even better for the Brewers, plus 12.68%. They've been great at home this year, and the Rangers on the road have been exactly the opposite. ROI below minus 10% for Texas on the road. So let's take a look at the matchup. We'll start with Bryce Wilson. And, man, he was having such a promising season. It just seems to be falling apart recently. He's got a 4.24 ERA and a 1.29 whip on the year. Look at his last 7 starts, his last 3 starts. He's got a 7.54 ERA in his last 3 starts. Now, I guess you could point to the fact that this game's at home in Milwaukee, where he has been better. I can see his last 4 home starts, 2.79 ERA, a 1.50 whip. But the expected FIP indicates that he's even been pretty lucky in those games. If you pull up the game logs, 5 of his last 7 starts have been on the road. So if you're looking to back Bryce Wilson and the Brewers here, you can point to that and be like, hey, it's a buy low spot for Bryce Wilson. He's been pitching almost solely on the road. Now that he's back at home, he can get back to work and start pitching well again. But I don't know if I really buy into that. If you look on June 15th, yeah, he did have a great home start against the Reds, 5 1/3 shutout innings. But his home start before that, he got hit up bad by the Cubs. And the Cubs are not a dangerous lineup. You cannot be getting hit up by the Cubs at home. I mean, I don't know. I think it's falling apart for Bryce Wilson. Look at his home away splits here. At home, 2.63 ERA. On the road, 5.31. So again, if you are looking at Bryce Wilson, you can look at these. He's definitely got better numbers at home. And you can also point at the Texas Rangers offensive numbers. In the last 30 days, it's a bottom 5 lineup. 27th in WRC+, 26th in OPS, 26th in WOBA. On the road, one of the worst lineups in baseball in the last month. 29th, 30th, and 30th. Against right-handed pitching, last 30 days, one of the worst lineups in baseball. 30th, 29th, 30th. The last 7 righty starters to pitch against the Rangers combined for a 2.79 ERA and an 0.95 whip. So righty starters have had no problems pitching against this Rangers team. When you look at the game logs, you can see they crushed Alec Marsh and they crushed Luis Severino. So 2 of the last 4 righty starters. Now, this graphic doesn't include the game that's happening right now. Rangers are up 2-0. They scored 2 on Freddie Peralta in the 5th. As a whole, Freddie looked pretty good. But you can see, last 4 starters before tonight, they got to 2 of the 4. So the Rangers bat, such a wild card. Now, something I really like for the Rangers lineup here, Bryce Wilson struggles with command. He's got a walk rate up at 9%. Look at the Rangers' offensive numbers against righties with a walk rate above 8%. They're actually a top 5 lineup. They've really capitalized against righties that struggle with walking guys. Also, the Rangers lineup loaded with lefties. Look how bad Bryce Wilson's numbers are against lefty bats. 396 WOBA, 179 whip. Rangers are projected to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lefties in the lineup. So as much as I want to look at those home away splits for Bryce Wilson and say, hey, he's at home where he's been much better, we can trust this guy, the truth is I don't. I think Texas is going to hit him up, and then we pull up his pitch mix. His main pitch is the cut fastball. Throws it in 33.5% of his pitches are cutters. Texas Rangers, top 5 lineup against the cutter this year, 8th in the last 30 days. I think we can count on the Rangers lineup, who I know has been unreliable. I think we can count on this lineup to get a few runs across on them. On the other side, we got Andrew Heaney, and his numbers are just the definition of mediocrity on the season. 4.21 ERA, 1.29 whip. Look at his numbers his last 7 starts, his last 3 starts, just pretty average across the board. How about his numbers on the road? Again, just as mediocre as it gets for Andrew Heaney. He's made 8 road starts this year, 3.52 ERA, 1.46 whip. Same goes for his last 6 road starts, his last 3 road starts. This dude's been pretty consistently average. Here are his game logs. I mean, solid start at home against a red-hot Mets team, 3 earned runs, but just 6 base runners in 6 innings. Seattle rocked him in his last road start, but his road start before that, he threw 6 shutout against the Marlins. Not sure if I'm going to throw him a parade for that one, because the Marlins might be the worst lineup in baseball against left-handed pitching. That being said, the Brewers haven't been doing shit against lefties either, and we'll get to it in 1 second. Here are the Brewers' offensive numbers as a whole. Slightly below average in the last 30 days, 17th, 16th, and 15th. In the last 14 days, 21st, 21st, and 20th. So the Brewers' bats definitely cooling off. They're also cooling off at home. If you were winding 2 or 3 weeks, this is one of the most dangerous home lineups in baseball. I would have put them right behind the Royals, the Yankees, the Astros, and Cleveland. I would put the Brewers right there at 5th or 6th as far as dangerous home lineups. They're really cooling off. You see they're trending in the wrong direction here, and they really haven't been a lineup I trusted against lefties all season. I trust them a lot more against righties. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 5, bottom 6 lineup against left-handed pitching. Check this out. The last 6 lefty starters to pitch against Milwaukee, 1.77 ERA and a 1.09 whip. So lefty starters have had no problems blanking this Brewers lineup. And look at the game logs. Tyler Anderson, 7 innings of 1-run baseball. Wow. Before that, Andrew Abbott, who's been having some troubles here and there. I mean, they actually got to Abbott a little bit, 3 earned runs in 5 innings pitched. Before that, Kikuchi, 5 shutout. Before that, Skubal, 6 2/3, 1 run. Before that, Christopher Sanchez, 6 innings, 1 earned run. Garrett Crochet, 6 innings, 1 earned run. Now, you could point at the fact that they've seen some good lefties on this list. I mean, Skubal, Sanchez has been good, Crochet, Kikuchi's been okay, but as a whole, this is not a lineup I trust against left-handed pitching. Now, if you are looking to back Milwaukee, you can point to the fact that they have scored runs on Andrew Heaney in the past. He's made 3 starts against the Brewers since 2022. He's 1-1 with a 5.02 ERA, 1.33 whip. So they have scored runs on him in the past, but they have terrible numbers against his pitch mix this year. on the season against lefties with a similar pitch mix to Andrew Heaney, 29th in WOBA, 30th in run value, 29th in barrel rate. So I don't think it's crazy to say Andrew Heaney goes in and pitches a decent game. I actually like the edge for the Rangers in the first 5 here. As far as the bullpen matchup, you got to give the edge to Milwaukee. In the last 30 days, they're 5th in ERA, 2nd in WOBA, 19th in expected FIP. Rangers in the last 30 days, I mean, not as bad as they were earlier in the season, but certainly not as good as the Brewers. But offensively, in the late innings, we might have to give the edge to Texas. I mean, in the last 14 days, they're pretty similar. Look at the last 7 days. The Rangers have been active in the late innings, and the Brewers really haven't. So I don't know how much of an edge I give to the Brewers in the late innings. And then we add on the fact that the Brewers bullpen is definitely on the tax side. McGill just pitched 2 nights in a row. Payam's pitched 2 nights in a row. Look, I took the Rangers here. I took Texas on the money line. I know it's disgusting, but I got the Rangers at plus money. I'm fading Bryce Wilson, fading the Tax Brewers bullpen. Let's go. Give me the Rangers. Next up, we got the Marlins on the road in Kansas City. Royals are pretty heavily favored here at home, minus 200. Total sitting at 9.5 or 10, depending on your sports book. There's 9.5s and 10s open. We got Chirinos pitching for the Marlins against Seth Lugo for the Royals. So let's get right into this matchup. We'll start with some ROI numbers. Royals have definitely been a more profitable team to bet than the Marlins on the year, plus 6.8% ROI to a minus 24%. But recently, it's been the opposite. In fact, in the last 5 days, if you've been betting the Marlins, you've been cashing out an 87% ROI compared to a minus 60.6% for the Royals. So as of late, the Marlins have been a hotter ticket than Kansas City, but not on the road. On the road, the Marlins, I think they've lost 5 or 6 straight road games. Meanwhile, the Royals at home has been one of the most profitable teams in Major League Baseball at home. But in the last 10 days, not the case. In the last 5 days, not the case. So all that Royals magic that we were cashing on earlier in the season really hasn't been there as of late. And let's take a deeper look into the matchup. We got the Marlins bats, and as we know, this unit's pretty awful. In the last 30 days, 30th in WRC+, 28th in OPS, 30th in WOBA. Against right-handed pitching, not much better. 26th, 24th, and 25th in the last 30. Bottom 3, bottom 4 in the last 14 as well. On the road, worst road lineup in baseball. 30th across the board in the last 30 days, not even any better. Marlins on the road, Marlins against righties, you name it. There's not many positive offensive splits for the Marlins. Here are the game logs. They did get to Bryce Miller. 6 earned runs on Bryce Miller. Before that, Logan Gilbert, 8 shutout. George Kirby, 7 innings, 2 earned runs. They did get to Lance Lynn also. Before that, Sonny Gray, gem. Luis Severino, gem. I mean, as a whole, we know this Marlins lineup is not a lineup we can trust. As far as pitch mix, Seth Lugo throws the curveball, the 4-seam fastball, and the sinker. He also throws a slider and a cutter. Out of those 5 pitches, the Marlins are bottom 7 in Major League Baseball against 4 of them. They have been hitting the sinker well, that's it. As a whole, I mean, Seth Lugo should be fine here. Although his production is definitely taken a little bit of a dip. On the season, he's got excellent numbers. 2.42 ERA, 1.07 WHIP. His last 4 starts back at a 4.56 ERA. So not quite as good as he was pitching earlier in the season. Also, he's been much better on the road. Look at his last 4 home starts, 4.38 ERA, 1.30 WHIP. Those numbers are fine, but it's not nearly as good as his numbers on the road. Here are his game logs, and you can just see the last 4 starts, not quite as good as we were seeing from Seth Lugo earlier in the season. Not that these are bad. I mean, at Dodger Stadium, 7 base runners and 2 earned runs in 6 innings is a great start. Oakland, 6 2/3, 2 earned runs, 9 base runners. That's okay. Yankees got to him a little bit, but who don't the Yankees get to? Cleveland got to him. On the road in Cleveland's a tough spot, though. Before that, on the road in Minnesota. I mean, 5 of his last 6 starts have been on the road. We haven't seen this dude pitch at home much recently. And the only home start we have seen from him was against the Yankees. So not really tough to make a judgment there. I think Seth Lugo should be fine. I mean, the Marlins lineup on the road, Marlins lineup against righties, there's just not many positive numbers there. So Seth Lugo should pitch a good game. On the other side, we got Chirinos. He's only made 1 start on the season. He only let up 2 runs, but he allowed 8 hits in just 5 innings. Not great. Now, obviously, we don't have a ton of data from this season, so we could pull up his home away splits from last year. He was better on the road. He had a 4.56 ERA and a 1.30 WHIP on the road, but look at the expected FIP. It's actually better at home, so really not much to go by there. As far as his pitch mix, he throws the sinker, the slider, and the 4-seam fastball, and check it out. In the last 30 days, the Royals are 25th, 20th, and 30th against those 3 pitches. They have hit the splitter well, but that's his 4th pitch. So maybe there's a path to Chirinos pitching a good game. And while we're talking about the Royals bats, we have to bring out the fact that they've been awful. In the last 14 days, this is the worst lineup in baseball. 30th at WRC+, 30th in OPS, 30th in WOBA, and against right-handed pitching, it's the same thing. dead last across the board here in the last 14 days. This Royals lineup has officially cooled off. And remember, earlier in the season, it's one of the most dangerous home lineups in baseball. Hasn't been the case. In the last 30 days, this is a below average home lineup. And in the last 14 days, even worse than that. So like I said, the Royals' magic has just been gone. Check this out. The last 9 righty starters to pitch against the Royals combined for a 1.78 ERA and an 0.95 whip. So righty starters have had no problems pitching against this team. Look at the game logs. I mean, these aren't Cy Young candidates. John Gray, 6 shutout. Nathan Eovaldi, 6 innings, 2 earned runs. Mitch Spence, 6 innings, 2 earned runs. Louis Medina, 5 2/3 innings, 1 run. Tyler Glasnow, now we might give him a pass for that one, but still 7 shutout. Before that, Gavin Stone, 7 innings, just 6 base runners. They scored 3 runs, but this Royals lineup is not hitting. Plain and simple. They're not hitting righties. So as much as I don't have a ton of data on Chirinos, and I can't sit here and say I trust them, but I don't think it's crazy to think he goes on the road in Kansas City and pitches a good game, honestly. As far as the bullpen matchup, no question the edge goes to Marlins. I mean, in the last 30 days, the Marlins bullpen is actually coming into form. 8th in ERA, 8th in WOBA, 13th in expected FIP, and the Royals bullpen has just fallen off a cliff. It's a bottom 5 bullpen on the season. Well, probably bottom 10 on the season. Bottom 5 in the last 30 days, though. So no question, bullpen edge definitely goes to the Marlins. And check this out. Offensively in the late innings, edge goes to the Marlins. In the last 7 days, the Marlins are actually an average lineup in the late innings, and the Royals are bottom 3. So the late inning edge goes to the fish here. And then you add on the fact that the Royals just used their 2 main arms out of the bullpen, and the Marlins got to rest all their guys. I think it's worth a shot here. I mean, look, this is high risk. Please tail responsibly. But I played the fish here. I got him at plus 175. I think it's worth a shot. Marlins money line. Next up, we got the Rockies on the road in Houston. Stros are pretty heavily favored at home here, minus 250, and the total sitting at 8.5. We got Austin Gomber pitching for the Rockies against Hunter Brown for the Stros. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got a pretty heavy lean on the Stros. 3.51 to 2.12 after 5 innings. Final score 6.04 to 4.09. So definitely model showing a comfortable win for the Astros. Let's take a look at some ROI numbers before we get into it. On the season, these two teams are pretty even. Actually, the Rockies have been slightly more profitable than the Astros, minus 11.6% to minus 12.1%. But look at recently. Stros have been cashing, plus 28.6% ROI in the last 10, plus 92.5% in the last 5. And the Stros have been cashing at home, plus 24.7% in the last 10, 56.3% in the last 5. But the Rockies have been turning a profit on the road as well. In the last 10 Rockies road games, they got a ROI above 22%. So let's not sleep on the Rockies here. They've been cashing in these road games. Let's start with the Rockies bats, and not nearly as bad as you would think. Last 14 days, this is a top 15 lineup, borderline top 10, 6th in OPS, 8th in WOBA. Now, WRC Plus is back at 13th because WRC Plus takes into account the ballpark, and obviously they play a lot of games in Coors Field, so their numbers might be slightly inflated. Look at their numbers against right-handed pitching. WRC Plus, 16th. 10th in OPS, 12th in WOBA. Okay, Rockies. Now we get to their numbers on the road, which is always the weakness when you're looking at Rockies games. And you can see on the season, this is a bottom 5 road lineup, but last 14 days, about average. So this Rockies lineup really hasn't been that bad. You can look at the game logs, though. Not really getting, I mean, they didn't get to Jake Irvin. They didn't get to Gavin Stone. Both of those guys are having great seasons. They got to Bobby Miller. That was at home in Coors, though. They got to Walker Buehler, again, at home in Coors. Before that, they rocked Jared Jones. So this Rockies lineup showing signs of life, man. I don't like the look of this pitch mix, though. Hunter Brown's main pitch is the 4-seam fastball. The Rockies have not been a good lineup against fastballs. He also throws the cutter, and they've hit cutters, but knuckle curve 27th, 30th on the season. I mean, Rockies don't have great numbers against his pitch mix. And speaking of Hunter Brown, this is where the handicap gets a little rough for the Rockies because Hunter Brown's been excellent. Remember when we were cracking jokes about how bad Hunter Brown was earlier in the season? Well, he's completely turned it around. In his last 8 starts, he's got a 2.30 ERA and an 0.96 whip. In his last 4 starts, it's even better than that. His last 4 starts at home, 3.38 ERA, 0.96 whip. Now, his last 6 starts, 4.54. He's definitely been a little bit better on the road, but Hunter Brown's dealing right now. I mean, look at his game logs. 6 innings, 1 earned run against the White Sox, 7 shutout against the Tigers, 6 shutout against the Angels. 6 innings, 3 runs, just 6 base runners against the Twins. Shut down the Mariners, shut down the Angels. I mean, we're talking 6 consecutive good starts from Hunter Brown here. And yeah, you can point to the competition. Like, Kyle, who's he pitched against? He's pitching against the Rockies at home. I mean, it's not like this is a tough start. So I don't see any reason to doubt the dominance from Hunter Brown. He's been pitching great. Yeah, against some questionable lineups, but the Rockies on the road are a questionable lineup. So I don't see any reason to doubt Hunter Brown. He's been great. On the other side, we got the Houston lineup. Last 30 days, slightly above average, 12th, 13th, and 14th. The last 7 days, they've definitely been hitting. This game's at home in Houston, which is huge because this is the best home lineup in baseball this year. Hasn't really been talked about because the Astros have been struggling elsewhere, but this team scores at home. First in WRC+, first in OPS, first in WOBA. Last 30 days, top 5. I mean, they haven't really slowed down. Here's the kicker, though. Austin Gomber throws with his left hand. On the last 30 days, this is not a good lineup against lefties. In fact, it's bottom 5, 26th, 24th, and 26th. Last 14 days looking about the same. So the Astros have been struggling with lefty starters. The last 8 lefty starters to pitch against the Astros, 4.47 ERA, 124 WHIP. Nothing crazy there. You can see from the game logs, they have gotten to a few of them. They got 4 runs on Skubal, 3 runs on Crochet. Those are 2 elite lefties the Astros were able to score on. But then before that, they pretty much got blanked by Kyle Harrison. Before that, they got to Patrick Sandoval, Tyler Anderson, who's having a good season. Then before that, they got blanked by J.P. Sears and Tyler Anderson. Tough to get a feel here because there's a couple where they were blanked by bad starters, but they also rocked a few good ones. So tough to get a feel for what the Astros lineup is doing against lefties. But then when we get to Austin Gomber, this is where you can find some value on Houston. First of all, his 2 main pitches are the 4-seam fastball and the changeup. Astros 11th in Major League Baseball against both those pitches in the last 30. And Austin Gomber, I mean, he's been struggling, to put it delicately. His last 2 starts, he's got an ERA above 11, a 196 WHIP. His last 3 starts on the road have been next level bad. I mean, 12.27 ERA, 245 WHIP. He's really struggled against good lineups. And on the road in Houston, the Astros at home are definitely a good lineup. Against top 10 lineups versus lefties, he's got a 7.53 ERA and a 174 WHIP. Now, I know the Astros aren't a top 10 lineup against lefties, but they're definitely a top 10 lineup at home. Here are his game logs here, and you can see we got to go all the way back to May 22nd to find the last time Austin Gomber pitched a good game. It was against Oakland. Other than that, 5 of his last 6 starts on the road, and his last 3 road starts have been awful. So don't have a ton of faith in Austin Gomber, although Houston's not the best lineup against lefties, so it's not all bad. As far as the bullpen battle, no question, Houston has the advantage here. But it's not that the Astros bullpen has been excellent. In the last 30 days, they're pretty average. It's that the Rockies probably have the worst bullpen in baseball. On the season, they're 30th in ERA, 30th in WOBA, 29th in expected FIP. In the last 30 days, about the same. So Astros bullpen has definitely been better. Offensively, though, this Rockies lineup has gotten busy in the late innings. It's a top 5 lineup against bullpens in the last 14 days, which is just crazy. So maybe the advantage in the late innings not quite as extreme. As far as betting this game, I mean, I really don't know what to do with this one. I expect Houston to win comfortably. Not trying to lay 1.5, though. I guess I'll say over or pass, but this is just a pass. Next up, we got Dodgers on the road in Chicago. Obviously, the White Sox are dogs here at home, plus 175. Total sitting up at 9.5. We got Bobby Thriller on the mound for the Dodgers against Chris Flexen. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and shocker, Model likes the Dodgers. 3.6 to 2.87 after 5 innings. Final score 6.26 to 4.38. So Model definitely pointing towards a comfortable Dodgers win. Let's take a look at some ROI numbers, and negative across the board for the Dodgers. On the season, the Dodgers have a minus 7% ROI. Last 10 games, last 5 games look pretty much the same. I mean, still better than the White Sox. I'm pretty sure the White Sox have been the least profitable team in baseball this year. An ROI below negative 36% is terrible. Now, I guess you can say, hey, the last 5 games, the White Sox have a positive ROI. But as we know, betting the White Sox this year has definitely been a bit of a death sentence. They have not been profitable. So let's take a look at this matchup. Dodgers bats are definitely hitting. Last 30 days, this is a top 5 lineup. Last 14 days, last 7 days, same exact thing. Against right-handed pitching, numbers look great. Last 30 days, top 10 lineup. Last 14 days, maybe even a top 5 lineup. On the road, one of the best lineups in baseball. On the season, they're second across the board. Last 30 days, third. Last 14 days, first. So this is a Dodgers lineup we can definitely trust to produce on the road. Look at the game logs here. Righty starters pitching against the Dodgers. I mean, they've gotten to almost every single person on this list. Seth Lugo was able to pitch. Well, actually, scroll down here. Seth Lugo, Michael Lorenzen. They were able to pitch good games. But as a whole, Dodgers are getting to righty starters here. As far as the pitch mix for Flexen, he does throw a cutter, and that is one of the pitches the Dodgers have struggled with as a unit. They're about a 10 lineup against cut fastballs, and Chris Flexen does throw it 25.8% of the time, but all his other pitches, the Dodgers are top 10 against, so I wouldn't say I have a ton of faith in Chris Flexen. Speaking of which, as we know, he's not having the best year. An ERA above 5. Whip isn't bad, 139 whip, so he's not letting a ton of guys on base, but he's letting up a lot of runs. Last 8 starts, he's got an ERA up at 5.73. Last 5 starts, though, 3.70 ERA and 1.44 whip. I mean, I guess that's okay. And in his last 2 home starts, 2.45 ERA and a 1.09 whip. So maybe Chris Flexen coming around a little bit. Maybe. We take a look at the game logs. Look at his last home start. 6 innings, 1 earned run, just 8 base runners against Houston. That's not a bad start. Look at his home start before that. Boston. That's a good lineup. 5 innings pitched, just 2 earned runs, just 4 base runners. Before that, a great start at Wrigley Field. Before that, I mean, Toronto, 9 base runners in 5 innings isn't great. So obviously, we're looking at Chris Flexen game logs. We know they're not going to be elite. This really isn't bad here. Chris Flexen hasn't been that bad. Is that enough for us to trust him against the Dodgers? Absolutely not. I mean, the Dodgers should get to him. It's not that I think Chris Flexen's a blind fade or anything, but Dodgers should be able to get a few runs across on him. On the other side, we got the White Sox bats, and we already know what this looks like. This is a bottom 10 lineup across the board, probably even worse than that. Against right-handed pitching, this has been arguably the worst lineup in baseball all season. In the last 30 days, last 14 days, last 7 days, bottom 1 or 2 in Major League Baseball. How about at home? It's the worst home lineup in baseball. 30th across the board on the full season at home. Last 30 days, last 14 days, things aren't getting much better for the White Sox. They're not getting to righty starters. The last 8 righty starters to pitch against the White Sox, 2.49 ERA and a 1.15 whip. That's 8 starters. It's even worse than that. The last 25 righty starters to pitch against the White Sox, 3.20 ERA and a 1.19 whip. So we're talking huge sample sizes showing that the White Sox do not get the righty starters. I mean, here are the game logs. They did get to Kenta Maeda. There's something. They also got to Spencer Arrighetti. But, I mean, other than that, White Sox have not been getting to righty starters. With the guys they got back from injury, I am inclined to trust the White Sox here and there against a lefty starter. Against a righty starter, I don't have a ton of faith in the White Sox getting runs across. But now we're going to pull up Bobby Thriller's numbers, and he's had a rough season. Now, he missed a lot of it with injury. He's only made, I believe he's only made 4 starts. But in his last 3 starts, 9 ERA. His last start, he's only made 1 start. This is a little misleading. He's only made 1 start since. Let's just pull up his game logs. Actually, that tells the story better. Here it is. He's only made 1 start since returning from injury, and it was on the road in Coors Field. So we can't judge this guy based on 1 start in the last 2 months and was on the road in Coors Field. It's a little bit unfair. And if I'm being honest, I think Bobby Thriller's going to deal here. I mean, he's got solid numbers against righty bats. It's lefties that have given him problems. White Sox are going to have 7 righty bats in the lineup. So the White Sox, worst home lineup in baseball, one of the worst lineups against righties in baseball, loaded with right-handed bats. I think Bobby Thriller's going to deal. I know his numbers look bad, but I think he's going to pitch a good game. Look at his pitch mix. There's the 4-seam fastball, the changeup, the curve, and the slider. The White Sox against those 4 pitches, 18th, 26th. They actually hit the curveball well, but then 30th against the slider. So I know Bobby Miller's numbers on the year are really shaky, but I actually trust him. I think he's going to pitch a good game here. So it's Dodgers all the way for me here. When we look at the late innings, I mean, no question, Dodgers have the bullpen edge. Last 30 days, Dodgers are 4th in ERA, 5th in WOBA. Expected FIPS down a little bit. But still, the White Sox have had one of the worst bullpens in baseball all year. Offensively against bullpens, shocker, all Dodgers, not even close. As far as betting this game, unfortunately, Dodgers minus 1.5 is currently priced at minus 130. That's just too expensive. You can get a White Sox team total under 3.5 at minus 115. Bobby Miller and those ugly numbers on the season, I think it's getting us a bit of a better price there. So I'd either look there or maybe even a Bobby Miller prop. Problem is, he only threw 79 pitches in his first start back from injury, so how deep is he going to go into the game? I would love to play Bobby Miller over 16.5 outs, but I don't know if he's going to be on a pitch limit, so this is probably going to end up being a pass, maybe White Sox team total under or pass. Next up, we got Oakland on the road in LA. Angels are favored at home here, minus 130, total sitting at 8.5. We got Mitch Spence pitching for the A's. Tyler Anderson is on the mound for the Angels. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, one sec, let me pull it up. According to the model, we got a lean on Oakland through the first 5 innings, 3.19 to 2.34, and a lean on Oakland final score, 5.38 to 4.27. So model likes the A's here. Let's take a look at some ROI numbers before we get into it. Pretty even. Both these, neither of these teams have been profitable this year. Minus 10.56% for Oakland, minus 10.37% for the Angels. And as far as the spot at LA, Angels have been a terrible home team to bet this year, minus 28.27. Oakland's been terrible on the road, though, minus 17.44. So just negative ROI across the board here. Let's get into the matchup. We got Tyler Anderson on the mound. He's got great numbers on the season. 2.48 ERA, 1.18 WHIP. Really hasn't slowed down. Now, there are a lot of people that are going to point at his expected FIP numbers and say it's only a matter of time before this guy comes crumbling down. Whether or not you're somebody that buys into those expected numbers, that's on you. I would say more often than not, they tend to be right. So Tyler Anderson, I'm sure, will start getting hit up at some point. But till then, we still haven't seen it. On the season at home, 2.74 ERA, 1.24 WHIP. Last 4 home starts look great. Last 2 home starts look great. So, he's pitching well. Look at his game logs here. 7 innings, 1 run against the Brewers. Pitched great again. Actually, he didn't pitch great against the Giants. 10 base runners in that game. Just one earned run, but that's not a great start. Astros scored on him, but before that, great start against the Padres. Great start against the, another one, Yankees. 10 base runners, just 1 earned run. You can't continue to allow 2 base runners per inning and not give up runs like this. He's definitely been skating on some thin ice, but before that, you get back to the Houston and Texas start at the bottom of this graphic. 2 great starts. So I'm not taking anything away from Tyler Anderson. I'm just saying, if you look at these numbers, look at all the expected FIPs. Every single game is indicating he should have given up more runs than he did. That's all I'm saying. Now, he's matched up against the Oakland lineup, and as we know, Oakland's offense isn't anything to fear. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 5 lineup, 25th, 30th, and 28th. They've been slightly better on the road than what we're used to on the season. This is one of the worst road lineups in baseball, but in the last 30 days, 20th, 19th, and 20th, so Oakland may be showing signs of life on the road, and Tyler Anderson throws with his left hand, which is good news because Oakland actually not completely terrible against lefties. In the last 30 days, they're actually a top 10 lineup against lefties. Last 14 days, last 7 days don't look quite as good. And if you look at the numbers for lefty starters against Oakland, last 7 lefties to pitch against the A's, 3.37 ERA, 1.05 WHIP. So I haven't really been getting to lefty starters. But when you pull up the game logs, 2 of the last 3 lefty starters they did get to. In fact, look at the dates on these. They haven't seen a ton of lefty starters recently. They saw Cole Reagans, that was just a few nights ago. 8 base runners on him, just 2 earned runs. That's not terrible. It's Cole Reagans. He's having a great season. Before that, they completely crushed Chris Sale. And before that, they really rocked Tyler Alexander. So Cole Reagans, who they weren't dead against. They showed some signs of life against Cole Reagans. Then 2 productive starts against lefty starters. Maybe a lineup we could trust to get to Tyler Anderson. I don't think it's crazy to say that Oakland's the one where we start seeing the regression pour in for Tyler Anderson. And when we take a look at some more numbers here, I could see it. Tyler Anderson is a starter that struggles with command. He's got a 10.68% walk rate on the year. Oakland is a top 5 lineup against lefties with a walk rate above 8%. Is Oakland about to crush Tyler Anderson? I don't know. It could be a sharp look. That being said, when you look at the pitch mix numbers, it does look great. Tyler Anderson throws the 4-seam fastball, the changeup, and the cutter. Oakland has pretty terrible numbers against those pitches. And if you look at Oakland against Tyler Anderson's pitch mix from lefties this year, 30th in on-base percentage, 23rd in WOBA, 27th in run value. Not great. And also, Tyler Anderson has owned this team. Since 2020, he's made 5 starts against Oakland. He's 3-0 with a 1.61 ERA. So Tyler Anderson has had no problems pitching against Oakland in the past. I still think Oakland's going to get to him a little bit. I realize that there is some strong evidence that points to Tyler Anderson pitching well, but I like Oakland to score some runs here. On the other side, we got Mitch Spence, and his numbers on the year look pretty good. 3.58 ERA, 1.27 WHIP. That's solid. Last 4 starts, last 2 starts, looking pretty mediocre. He did struggle in his last road start. You can see in his game logs, the Twins absolutely crushed him. But that was a week and a half ago, and the Twins at the time, they were crushing everybody. They were the hottest lineup in baseball for like an 8-day stretch, and that was right in the middle of that. Other than that, his last start, home against Kansas City, not really a great road lineup, but he pitched well. He pitched well to start 2 starts ago against Toronto at home. 7 innings, just 2 runs, 5 hits. That's a great start. He got hit up by Seattle, but before that, great road start against the Rays. 5 1/3 shutout innings on the road in Tampa, just 1 hit. So there's some really nice looking starts littered in here. Not saying Mitch Spence is a guy I really trust, but he hasn't pitched terribly. And this is a fortunate spot for him. Yes, he's on the road, but the Angels' bats have completely disappeared. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 3, bottom 4 lineup. In the last 7 days, it's one of the worst lineups in baseball. At home, we know the Angels don't hit. In the last 30 days, 28th in WRC+, 26th in OPS, 26th in WOBA. Same thing in the last 14 days. And remember how we were pointing at the Angels getting hot against right-handed pitching? Yeah, that's gone too. In the last 30 days, they're a bottom 5 lineup against righties. In the last 7 days, one of the worst lineups in baseball against righties. The last 4 righty starters to pitch against the Angels, an 0.37 ERA and an 0.70 whip. Just wow. They haven't touched the last few righty starters they've seen. And here are the game logs. Tyler Glasnow, 7 innings pitched, just 1 run, 2 hits. Landon Knack, 5 shutout innings, 2 hits. Freddie Peralta, 6 shutout innings, 3 hits. Tobias Myers, 6 1/3 shutout innings, 4 hits. Now, if you look all the way back towards early June, you could see they were getting to righty starters earlier in the month, but that just seems way in the past at this point. I don't trust the Angels' bats against righties. When we take a look at the pitch mix here, Spence throws the cutter and the slider. Those are his 2 main pitches. He actually throws them a lot. 77% of his pitches are either the cutter or the slider. Angels against those 2 pitches, 18th and 19th in the last 30 days. And Mitch Spence has been significantly better against bad lineups, which is huge here. He's got a 3.29 ERA in his 13 2/3 innings against bottom 10 lineups, which we know the Angels most definitely are. So even though Tyler Anderson has excellent numbers on the year and it's Oakland on the road, they've been so bad on the road, I actually don't hate the A's in the first 5. I think Oakland might have the slight edge. When we look at the bullpen matchup, Oakland definitely has the edge. No question the A's bullpen has been significantly better than the Angels. The Angels bullpen has been so bad this year. And offensively against bullpens, edge goes to Oakland again. So, okay, I kind of like the edge for Oakland in the first 5. I like the edge for Oakland late in the game. We're getting them at plus money. This might be a spot to take a shot on Oakland. Now, I'm recording this while the game's still going on. It's 2-1 Angels. It's the bottom of the 3rd. So I really want to see the bullpen usage here. If Oakland uses all their main bullpen arms in this game, I'm probably going to get scared off. But if those bullpen arms are available, I'm taking Oakland at the plus money. So I will let you know on the live show, but it'll be Oakland money line or pass for me. I'm leaning towards the A's here. Update. So Angels ended up winning that game and it clinched my green knight. But it also means that Oakland's coming into this one with a fully rest bullpen, which is why I'm taking the A's here. I bet this one. Oakland has lost 9 consecutive road games, and I am catching a falling knife here. Give me Oakland money line at plus 110. Next up, we got the Twins on the road in Arizona. Snakes are short home dogs here, plus 100, and the total's at 8.5. We got Joe Ryan on the mound for the Twins. Brandon Pfaadt pitching for the Snakes. Let's take a look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we're pretty deadlocked in the first 5 innings. 2.81 to 2.74, slight lean towards the Twins. Final score, slight lean towards the Twins again. 5.53 to 4.89. Let's take a look at some ROI numbers before we get into this one. Neither of these teams have been turning a profit this year on the season. 3.77% ROI for the Twins, negative 5.1 for the Snakes. Both of these teams have been positive in the last 10 games, but both have been negative in the last 5 games. As far as Minnesota on the road versus Arizona at home, both negative ROIs on the season. So neither of these teams have been turning a profit. Let's take a look at this matchup. We'll start with Brandon Pfaadt. Finally, it looks like his season's starting to come together. If you remember, he started off the season struggling, and his expected FIP numbers look good. So we were all like, oh, the regression's going to come for this guy. He's going to start pitching well. We're starting to see it a little bit. In his last 7 starts, he's got a 4.12 ERA, 1.17 whip. Last 2 starts, 2.92, 1.46. So Brandon Pfaadt's starting to come around a little bit. He's also been excellent at home. His last 4 home starts, he's got a 2.42 ERA and a 1.12 whip. His last 2 home starts, even better than that. So he's been pitching really well in the desert. Here are his game logs here. He struggled on the road in Washington. He struggled on the road in San Diego. Struggled on the road at Citi Field. Struggled on the road in Texas. I mean, what's the continuing pattern here? They're all on the road. In fact, 5 of his last 6 starts have been on the road. So finally, he gets to come back home. And look at his last 2 home starts on this graphic here. 6 innings, 1 earned run against the Angels. 7 innings, 1 earned run against the Reds. So are those 2 lineups as good as the Twins lineup? Probably not. But still, it's important to point out that his last 2 home starts were excellent, and we haven't seen him pitch at home much. Here are his home-away splits on the year. 3.41 ERA at home, 5.03 on the road. Strikeout-to-walk ratio better at home. FIP better at home. So I like Brandon Pfaadt in this spot. But he's pitching against Minnesota, and they have some excellent numbers. The question we need to ask is, are the Minnesota bats cooling off? See, look at this graphic. Doesn't look like it. Last 30 days, this is a top 3 lineup. In the last 14 days, first across the board. Last 7 days, 6th across the board. On the road, excellent. 9th across the board full season. Last 30 days, last 14 days, you name it, looks great. Against right-handed pitching, looks great. Top 5 last 30, last 14, top 10 last 7. Everything looking great. But then we start looking at some game logs here, and the last 3 righty starters who pitched against the Twins actually were able to pitch well. The last 3 righty starters, 3.18 ERA, 129 whip. If you pull up the game logs, Joey Estes, 6 innings pitched, just 2 earned runs. Zach Littell, who's really been struggling, he was able to pitch a good game against the Twins. Before that, Taj Bradley, 6 innings pitched, 2 earned runs. They had 9 base runners, but still, 3 righty starters in a row. None of them would be what I would consider good righty starters. They were able to hold this Twins lineup in check. So I don't think it's wild to say the Twins lineup might be cooling off here. Now, pitch mix-wise, this doesn't look great. Brandon Pfaadt throws a 4-seam fastball, the slider, the sinker, and the changeup. Twins have great numbers against all 4 of those pitches. Also, if this Twins lineup is still hot, that's dangerous because Brandon Pfaadt struggled against good lineups. Against top 10 lineups versus righties, he's got a 5.53 ERA on the season. He's been really good against bad lineups. So if this Twins lineup is not cooled off, it could get bad. But overall, I think Pfaadt could pitch well here. And I mean, look at his righty-lefty splits. Struggles against lefty bats, absolutely dominant against righty bats. Twins have a lot of righties in this lineup. 5 projected righties, 2 of the lefties are switched. So there's only 2 true lefties in the Twins lineup. I think Pfaadt's going to pitch well. I do. I like Pfaadt in this spot. Now, on the other side, we got Joe Ryan. Obviously, he's having a great year. 3.13 ERA, 0.96 whip on the season. Really hasn't slowed down as of late. Here are his game logs, and this is where we start to question Joe Ryan. Who has he pitched against? The Rays, the Athletics, the Pirates. On the road in Houston, that's a good one. Well, he got crushed in that start. 10 base runners, 5 earned runs in just 5 innings. Then before that, the Royals at home. We know the Royals don't hit on the road. Washington. Then, oh, look, the Yankees. That's a good lineup. They crushed him, too. So out of his last 7 starts, the only 2 times he saw decent lineups, he got hit up. And that's kind of the story with Joe Ryan. Look at his splits here versus top 10 lineups versus bottom 10 lineups. Look at the innings pitched. Against bottom 10 lineups versus righties, 49 2/3 innings pitched. Against top 10 lineups versus righties, 10 1/3. And he's gotten crushed. 7.84 ERA, 165 whip. So the question becomes, do we think the Arizona Diamondbacks are a top 10 lineup versus righties? Because those numbers show they should get to them if they are. Tough question to answer. In the last 30 days, the answer is yes. They're a top 10 lineup across the board. Last 14 days, top 10 lineup across the board. Last 7 days, not so much. Now, that's a small sample size. Why don't we look at their numbers at home? Last 30 days, top 5 lineup. Last 14 days, top 5 lineup. Okay. How about their numbers against right-handed pitching? Looking solid here. Last 30 days, top 10 lineup against righties. Last 14 days, top 5 lineup against righties. The last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Snakes combined for a 5.06 ERA, so they've been scoring runs on righty starters, and here they are. They didn't get to Zach Wheeler. Okay, who is getting to Zach Wheeler this year? Before that, crushed Taijuan Walker. Got to Jake Irvin, who's been excellent this year. They crushed him. Before that, they got to Eric Fetty, got to Chris Flexen, 4 runs on Griffin Canning. Jose Soriano pitched well against them. That was back on June 12th, 2 weeks ago. So, as a whole, Snakes are getting to righty starters here, and they got great numbers against Joe Ryan's pitch mix. He throws a 4-seam fastball on over 48% of his pitches. Want to know what the best lineup in baseball is against the 4-seam fastball in the last 30 days? The Arizona Diamondbacks. Are the Snakes going to get to Joe Ryan here? Before we answer that question, there are a couple real nice looks for Joe Ryan if you're looking to back the Twins. First of all, against his specific type of pitcher, Snakes have struggled. First of all, he doesn't walk anybody. He's got a 4.18% walk rate on the year. Arizona bottom 10 lineup against righties with a walk rate below 6%. Don't like the look of that. Also, Joe Ryan's a strikeout guy. Arizona against righties with a strikeout rate above 24%, bottom 10 lineup. So against righties that don't walk guys, they struggle. And against righties that strike a lot of guys out, they struggle. Both of those describe Joe Ryan. Also, Joe Ryan dominant numbers against lefty bats. Arizona's going to have 5 lefties in the lineup, including the first 3 hitters of their order. So I do think Arizona's going to get to Joe Ryan, but those last 3 graphics I just put up are worrisome. And then when we get to the bullpen matchup, no question Minnesota has the edge. I mean, the last 30 days, Minnesota's been an above-average bullpen. Arizona's bullpen has been so bad. They've been so bad all year. So no question the Twins have the bullpen edge. And offensively, in the late innings, it's not even a discussion. The last 14 days, last 30 days, Twins have been one of the best lineups in baseball in the late innings. Arizona hasn't. They're a bottom 10 lineup in the late innings. So I want nothing to do with the second half of this game, but I like those Snakes in the first 5. I already bet this. I took Arizona first 5 money line at plus 102 on FanDuel. I'm locked in. Already bet it. If you're looking to make a live play on this one, maybe wait, grab the Twins live. Hopefully Arizona's up like 3-1 going into the 5th. Grab the Twins live money line at a nice price. They should have the huge advantage in the late innings. So I want nothing to do with the full game, but I took the Snakes first 5 money line in this one. There are a couple more games on the slate. We got Nats, Padres. That game went late though, went into extra innings. I didn't even get a chance to look at what bullpen arms were used or anything like that. Also, they switched the Padres pitcher. It was supposed to be Yu Darvish. Now it looks like it's going to be that guy Mazer, however you say it. So I haven't even looked at that game. And Cubs Giants, I don't even know what to do with that. To be honest, I didn't look at the game. I will take a look and we'll talk about it on the live show. But as of right now, I got nothing for that game. Like I said earlier, make sure you tune in for the live show, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. We'll go through every single game on the board. Also, if you want my top bets or top bets from anyone on the staff here, head over to KyleKirms.com and sign up for Sauce Network Plus. Comes with the top bets, access to the Discord. Also, you can participate in the weekly betting league. Winner gets $100 and a trophy right here. Winner gets $100 and a Sauce Network handicapping trophy mailed to them every single week. We're in week number 3. It's been fun. So if you're interested in that, head over to the website, sign up for Sauce Network Plus. Let's have ourselves a nice Tuesday. Happy to be in the green for Monday night. Let's keep that rolling. Remember to bet responsibly, and I'll talk to you in the Discord.